this stunning journal that you've got in front of you now. We were looking in this issue to try to think back over the 30 years of the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics and also look to the future. We also are very much aware that this earth, I wouldn't say it belongs to all of us across the entire world, but we're all part of it, aren't we? And therefore it was very important to us to think about widening it out, not having borders, and widening our reach and inviting work that represents people around the world and their views on geopoetics and how that affects them. So, but the best way to start this issue, I think, was definitely to have our director, Norman Bissell, reflecting on the 30 years. You'll really enjoy that, and looking forward to the next 30. There's a beautiful range of work. We've got essays, poetry, artwork, we've even got a song. And I won't go into a lot of detail with that because you'll see it all in the editorial and in the contents page. So I'm actually just going to skip back to Marcel, and we can introduce the first guest.
Lovely, thank you. Noi, did you want to say a tiny bit about the Geopoetics Society first? Because that's kind of the next page. Did you want to just give a very brief overview, or?
You can see in front on the screen there the outline of what Geopoetics stands for, what it is. And this is on the website, www.geopoetics.org.uk, and all the links are there. And this it's now been uploaded to the website, so you can, after tonight, you can, at your leisure, enjoy reading through it, the whole of the journal. As with the other issues of the journal, they're all on our website. And thanks to Alistair for arranging that at the last minute. So quite a number of the contributors are here with us tonight, and we hope they will read their poem or say a little bit about their essay or a little bit about their artwork. So it's a bumper issue, we're calling it. There's, I think, about 78 pages. We had more contributions from different parts of the world than we've ever had. So that's all very positive.
Our first guest this evening is Noi himself, and I'm going to quickly give his bio, which is at the end of this issue. Norman Bissell has lived on the Isle of Lung for 17 years and is the director of the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics. He is the author of the poetry collection Slate, Sea and Sky, which is a beautiful title, and the novel Barnhill about George Orwell's last years on Jura. His latest book, Living on an Island Expressing the Earth, tells of how he came from Glasgow to Lung and his involvement in geopoetics over many years. He was the lead artist in the Coastal Cultures Islands residency Expressing an Island, funded via Culture Heritage Arts Assembly, Argyll and the Islands. Over to you, Noi.
Thanks very much. Well, Alistair, if you could go down to my essay, just scroll down after the editorial. There we are. So I just want to say that it's been 30 years, but it's actually 35 if you include the Open World Poetics group, which myself and Tony McManus and others founded in Glasgow in late November 1989. And in the most recent book that I've written, Living on an Island Expressing the Earth, here you are, plug. In that, I've actually got a series of chapters really about the history of geopoetics in Scotland, beginning with Kenneth White and the Jargon Group in the 60s, and then the Open World Poetics Group, and then the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics, which was founded on Burns Night, very appropriately, in 1995 by Tony McManus and myself and others. But the reason we didn't call it Geopoetics at the beginning in '89 was that I didn't feel that people were ready for the concept of geopoetics back then. Although the International Institute of Geopoetics had been founded in Paris by Kenneth White and others that year, his essays about geopoetics were only available in French back at that time. So the question is, what have we done in those 30 years? And what I've tried to do, instead of a chronological approach, which I took in the book, I found that when I tried to write that, it was far too long for this purpose. So for Stravaig, I boiled it down into a number of things that we did to promote geopoetics in Scotland. And the first of these was raising awareness. And Kenneth White would come to Scotland and give talks and book readings, and in particular, a whole number of lectures and readings at the Edinburgh International Book Festival from 2001 to 2009, and other lectures elsewhere in Scotland. Tony McManus wrote articles about geopoetics for the likes of Chapman, Edinburgh Review, Contrastus, Radical Scotland, magazines that were very important at the time. And he also introduced the work of Kenneth White in the Scotssoon cassettes of White reading many of his poems. And it was also a series of lectures at the University of Edinburgh Office of Lifelong Learning that Tony began, and which Bill Eddy and I revived in 2005 and 2007. So another important legacy which Tony McManus left us was that he curated the White World exhibition for the National Library of Scotland, which went not only in Edinburgh, but all over Scotland. And then we also a number of us gave talks about geopoetics. Jim McCarthy, Gordon Peters have spoken about geopoetics on many places you see there at the bottom of page 5. And if you could scroll down, please, Alistair. We also launched our website, I think it was 2007 or thereabouts. And the lectures which were part of the of geopoetics are also on the website. So the second issue that I wanted to highlight is that we've produced a whole number of publications to promote geopoetics in Scotland. And up at the top of the screen there, you can see the 3 issues of Open World in the order from the left to the right, number 1, number 2, number 3. And these were collective productions, which we actually sold in the bookshops in those days, in the early 1990s. And then I think the first book that we brought out from what was then called the Open World imprint was Coast to Coast, a book of interviews and conversations which Kenneth White had written and had with various magazines. And we brought that out, I think, 1996, because the publishers, although they published lots of his poetry and his way books, they didn't publish. They said there was no market for his essays. So that's what we did to try and bring the ideas of geopoetics to life in Scotland. Then in 2003, there was a conference that Gavin Bowd and Charles Forsdyke organised in St Andrews University. And out of that came that book, Grounding a World, Essays on the Work of Kenneth White, which came out in 2005. We also brought out this booklet, Geopoetics, Place, Culture, World, which has got a reference really to Patrick Geddes in the title. And we reprinted that in 2024 because we ran out of the 500 copies of 2009. We also launched Stravaig, as you can see here, number 14. We launched that in 2012. And then I already mentioned my own book, but one of the important things about my own book is that it also highlights the role of women in being forerunners of geopoetics. Women like Joan Eardley, Rachel Carson, Catherine Stewart, and Nan Shepherd. And I felt that was important to bring that out, because one of the serious criticisms of Kenneth White's work is that it's very much a male canon that you'll find in his books. There's hardly a woman ever mentioned in them. So even his own wife, Marie Claude. So I've mentioned them, all of them, and written about them and their work in that chapter. If you could scroll up now, please. Thanks, Alistair. So another approach that we've taken to promote geopoetics has been organising events and conferences. I'll not go through all of these. There's a whole range of them there. But we had Geopoetics Days Out in Isle of May, Water of Leith, Arthur's Seat, and a whole number of other places like Brantwood. We had a weekend at Brantwood, John Ruskin's former home in the Lake District, down in Snowdonia, Isle of Purbeck, and so we've been promoting geopoetics through day events and also conferences, weekend events and conferences. I think the most important of the conferences that we held, of which there have been many, was the one that you see on your screen on the Isle of Seal in 2017. And one of the important things that we did there was to have more workshops rather than people talking at you, so to speak, so that we're more participation in these workshops. That one that you can see there with Alistair McIntosh in it, and Ulrich Kochel and Dave Francis and others, is on creative ethnology. And out of that conference, which was attended by about 70 people from different parts of the world, out of that came an invitation to Alistair and I to go to Asheville in North Carolina to promote geopoetics, and for Mary McFadden, who's also in that picture. She organised a Highland Stravaig in 2018 following that. So a whole number of people who took part in that conference joined the Scottish Centre, and they also became active as office bearers and council members of the Geopoetics Scottish Centre. If you could scroll up again, please, Alistair. Now, I suppose the most recent conference we held was in June 2024, which was a Kenneth White International Conference in Glasgow to mark his passing in August 2023. And a whole number of papers were given and discussions took place on the significance of his work. And you're going to hear one of those papers from Steve Sutcliffe a bit later on. I think one of the most important things for the future as well as the past of geopoetics is to try to build a collective leadership, have a collective approach to the development of geopoetics in Scotland. And the main way we can do that is through the council members and the editorial group of Stravaig, who contribute all the year round to the development of geopoetics in Scotland. Now, briefly then, looking at the next 30 years, I don't expect it to be here all those 30 years, but I think it's important to say that we've increased our membership over this period. We've increased our mailing list to over 1,400, and we've got members in different parts of the world. I would like to see a more collective leadership when I bow out as director at the 2026 AGM. And before that, though, we have produced a feature-length documentary film, Expressing the Earth, which, if you scroll down, Alistair, you'll see Glenda Rome in action, filming one of the workshops here at Cullerpool Hall in 2023. And this is a really beautiful film, which is an hour and a quarter long, and which we hope to bring out this year and to have it available at a whole number of screenings from this year onwards. Finally, I want to refer to the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics, the actual cottage, which is now the home of the Scottish Centre. That's it there in the picture. Next door to me here, I'm in 51 Cullerpool, that's in 52. And the idea there is that we've got a huge library of books related to geopoetics, but also novels, non-fiction of all kinds. And we're delighted to receive the papers and books and tapes of Tony McManus and Nano McManus from their daughter Anna and son Dominic just earlier this year. And all of these will be available to folk who want to come and research geopoetics. I hope to provide some short courses based here, and we also would like to have some writers and artists residencies in the centre. So really, I think my final appeal really to you all is to get involved in geopoetics. It won't keep growing if we don't all take an active part. I've found it's been very enriching to my life in many ways, and I hope you will join us in taking part. You'll see later on at the end we have a membership form, and you get a free copy of Grounding a World if you join as a new member. So I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end once we've gone through. Sorry, that's quite a long presentation, but I hope it gives you a fair outline of what we've been doing and why geopoetics is important, not only in Scotland, but internationally. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Norrie. So I've got a list of 14 people who are going to either read their poems or talk about their artwork or sing for us this evening. If we're going to do it in the order of the journal. If I skip over you and you want to read it or you've changed your mind, just send me a little message on the chat and I can kind of pop you back in because we're going with the list that we had earlier on. So if you feel like you do want to contribute, please kind of let me know and we can pop you in there. So the next person who's going to be reading her poem for us, Mandy. I think Mandy's here, isn't she? I can see you. Lovely. So Mandy Haggith lives in, and I'm going to butcher this word, I'm sorry, is it Asenth? And teaches literature and creative writing at the University of Highland and Islands. Her books include 6 poetry collections, most recently Brunny, a tree poetry anthology, a non-fiction book about paper, which sounds fascinating, and 5 novels. A non-fiction book, The Lost Elms, will be published by Wildfire in summer 2025. Over to you, Mandy.
Thanks very much, Marcel, and thanks, Norrie. That was a fascinating insight. I live in Assynt and I've lived here for 25 years now, and so this little poem it's called Nice. I'm very fortunate that under my feet is 3 billion year old rock, pretty much the oldest on the planet, and this poem is called Nice, with the subtitle You Are What You Eat. Since living in Assynt, I've become a little sandstone, a smidgen quartzite, a morsel porphyry, but mostly nice. I have Atlantic omelette for brains. I contain beach shells, ground to sand, pecked at by hens, but mostly I'm nice. I eat nice turnip, potatoes, parsnips, and carrots. I eat nice onions, garlic, beans and peas. I don't eat nice rice, but I have eaten nice ice cream. Slowly, year by year, meal by meal, I am turning into the oldest rock in the world. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Mandy. That was lovely. My sister's a geologist, actually, so she would have loved that kind of in-joke. So thank you for that. Great. And then our next person is Deborah Gray, and they have written an essay called Basalt. Deborah, I think you're here. Yes, there you are. I'll just introduce you if that's okay. Deborah Gray is a textile artist, hand spinning, knitting, natural dyeing, botanical printing and stitch based in Oban. Her work explores living and non-living, human and non-human elements of landscape. Using hyperlocal raw materials, she creates textile work which resonates with place. Deborah has exhibited nationally and internationally, including regular involvement with Art Map Argyll. She has participated in 4 residencies at the Iceland Texture Centre, very jealous, with freelance work at the V&A Dundee in Oban and projects involving the Faroe Islands, Greenland, Iceland and Norway. Fantastic. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much to the editorial group for accepting my submission for this edition of Stravaig. The piece that is shown in the photograph here, and hopefully there are some other photographs that you can see, because I'm unfortunately not able to share anything from my laptop. I've got IT gremlins. This piece was made during a residency at the Icelandic Textile Centre in 2019 in the winter, and it's really inspired by the local geology, the basalt columnar basalt rock formations that are very common in Iceland, but obviously we have our own representatives of those rock types here, notably Fingal's Cave. As you said in the introduction, I'm really interested in using very local materials. So this piece is made from sheep's wool, which was grown about a 15-minute drive from the Icelandic Textile Centre where I made the work. I dyed some of the wool with plants that were literally within about 100 metres of the Textile Centre. I spun by hand and then knitted a series of hexagons. I'm not sure, have you got other photographs? Yeah, here's a picture of the actual landscape that really inspired this particular piece. It's a promontory on the very northern tip of the Skagahidi headland in the north of Iceland. So it's only perhaps 20 or 30 kilometres south of the Arctic Circle. That photograph was taken on an extremely cold November day. I think it was about -8 when I was there. And the whole of that promontory is basically the tops of the basaltic columns. So these hexagonal shapes are everywhere, either forming irregular pavements, you could say, or under the grass, making the grassy surface quite uneven and tricky to walk on. And yet people, until relatively recently, people lived in this very exposed, very open environment. It was a fishing settlement and people lived in houses made out of turf, as they did all over Iceland until the 1920s or 30s, outside the city. And the remains of these buildings have just melted back into the landscape, but leave small hummocks of something that feels just like wool felt. And I think that's what gave me this connection or inspiration to recreate this landscape in wool. Although I haven't felted it, I've spun it and knitted it. Obviously the essay is quite long and I'm not going to go through all of that just now. I'm very happy to answer any questions that anybody might have about the work.
Thank you, Deborah. I always love hearing about artists' kind of processes and inspirations and things like that, because as a non-artist myself, it always seems like a complete kind of miracle that something kind of is kind of made in that way. So thank you for that. If anyone does think of any questions, we can put them in the chat as well and then have a look at the end. Thank you. Okay, so the next person on our list is going to be Patrick Corbett. Sorry, Patrick. And he's contributed an essay about Kenneth White to this publication, page 11. I can see you're looking for it there, Alistair. mouse. I'm going to introduce you, Pat, if that's okay. Patrick Corbett is a carbonate geology specialist. But why you've put all technical words in your bio? Thank you. But seeing oolites at Helpson showed him a new perspective. Gently undulating topography with varying soils and stones in the fields. The dry stone walls and building stones all relate subtle human aspects of this soft rock that he had not appreciated before. Patrick was a professional geologist for many years before taking up poetry and is now exploring the geopoetic appreciation and expression of the earth, combining technical expertise in the widening field of science communication through poetry. Patrick hosted Alison Hallett's residency at Heron Watch University and co-edited Earthlines, Geopoetry and Geopoetics, published by the Edinburgh Geological Society in 2021. He is the Assistant Director of the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics. And here he is now. Over to you, Pat.
Marcel, I'd forgotten I'd written all that. So
I know, it's one of the longest.
And I don't know, yes, I don't know what it was written for, but it was very appropriate. Thank you for the intro. I was following the order, so I thought you'd just gone straight past, so I'm okay. Yes, so I was trying to investigate Kenneth White because as a geologist, I opened his collected works and came across this poem, Fossil, and it's there in the text, and I was just a little bit gobsmacked because, as a geologist, you're always cracking open rocks and finding interesting things, and to find that poem was very important as my entry into geopoetics. And as a result of that, I had some correspondence, which I refer to in the paper with Kenneth White about his geology. So you can read that. So I think if you go down to the next page, there's some pictures of Fairley. So the key thing is that Kenneth White started his a young lad. Now, if you put your arrow to the left of those buildings in the white in the far, that's pretty much that is pretty much Kenneth White's bedroom in the first house that he lived in Fairley. And so he looked out on this shoreline, the red sandstone, and if you go down to the next picture, you'll see there's actually the whole harbour there. You see that lump of basalt there, not from Iceland, but now in Scotland, actually forms a little harbour there, a harbour wall in Fairley. So he had the rock right in front of him, and he was always inspired. And he went on to use geology as a metaphor. So he talked, and I illustrate that with this idea of a ring complex, and he referred to Brittany being a ring, a central complex. That he was a complex character. That's basically what he was saying. And so if you go down, I've included a picture. Go down a few pages there, Duncan. I think if that's you driving, there's this picture of complex geology in Brittany, which can be simplified as a sort of central complex. And so the geologist would draw a simple sketch, and the one actually on Mull looks much more convincingly a simple ring complex. And so he liked to use geological metaphor. And going on a little bit, I've touched briefly on that other poem, McDermott, and how he also used geological metaphor. And I wondered how whether McDermott and Kenneth White had actually come together to discuss geology in their discussions, because I think they did talk to each other. And then we'll just end up with his last comment, which I've always mentioned, is that everything starts with the geology, and without a geology, what does it say down there? So a country begins with the ground, a geology, and when it loses contact with that, it is no longer a country. It is just a supermarket, a Disneyland, and a madhouse. So I kind of like that we have to stay connected. And I think I'm looking forward to the release of Glenda's film. I watched it this morning again, the last viewing. It is really beautiful, and it's actually very moving. And Glenda's done a brilliant job in weaving together Kenneth White's story with contributions of 6 or 7 artists. And just to end on the note, it's very nice to see the next few pages, Phoebe Sleet's images. So Phoebe is I don't know if Phoebe's in the call. Marcel, you're going to give her a slot? But if you go to the next couple of pages, Duncan, keep going. Phoebe is a structural geologist, which means she goes out and looks at structural geological features. There's one there of the island of Egg, which is quite close to where you are, Norrie. and she has a wonderful watercolor sketches. So geologists love to sketch, but none of them do it as beautifully as Phoebe, and I recommend you keep an eye on her work. Very nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. It's always great to get your kind of insight from a kind of technical side. And thanks for highlighting Phoebe. She's not here tonight on the call, actually. So that's, yeah, I've not seen geology sketches like that before, I must say. Thank you. Okay, our next person is Stephen Sutcliffe, who I think I've seen on the call.
Yes, here I am. Hello.
There you are. Oh, there you are. Lovely. Thank you. And I'll just introduce you quickly, if that's okay. And you're going to talk about your essay about Kenneth White as well. Dr. Stephen J. Sutcliffe is Senior Lecturer in the Study of Religion at the University of Edinburgh. He published Mountain Fox Otter in Open World 3 and taught White's shorter poems as part of an extramural class called Quest and Vision at Glasgow University in 1994. Other publications include Children of the New Age, A History of Spiritual Practice, and New Age Spirituality, Rethinking Religion. Thank you. Over to you, Steve.
Oh, well, thanks very much. And yeah, just to reiterate, thanks to the editors for including this essay in this splendid looking, I must say, splendid looking edition of Stravaig with some wonderful visuals in particular. It follows on quite well from Pat, actually, because Pat and I were going to go down to visit Fairley together, and then something happened. I couldn't make the date, so Pat went on himself. But then I went down, I think, the following week with my younger son, Neil, on a very day of wet weather, actually, which is kind of a bit of a dampener for the spirits, but it was good to be there. There's not much point in me talking about the content of the essay. You can read that yourselves. It is basically about how the young Kenneth White, at the age of about 15, met an older gentleman called Dougal Semple, then around 69, 70, in Fairley, when White had a kind of part-time job going around taking the names of folks in the village for the voters' roll. And Dougal Semple, following his anarchist proclivities, refused to sign, but said to Kenneth, well, come on in and I'll tell you why I'm not going to sign. If you could scroll down to the picture of Dougal outside his cottage. Yeah, go down the page. There we are. Yeah. So this was Dougal in this really quite small cottage as it was then, Rose Cottage in Fairley, around the time when Kenneth came a knocking on the voters' roll. And Dougal was a vegetarian, a naturalist, a journalist, a follower of nature cure and naturopathy. And at the time when Kenneth met him, of course, he was getting near to the end of his life, so it wasn't as active as he used to be. He came from Johnston in Renfrewshire. He lived in Beath at a back to the land colony in the 20s and 30s, where you had fruit farming going on and various people, folks who were practitioners of what is called life reform, a movement for really radical individual reform in diet and clothing, in health, in getting back to the land, etc., came to visit him there. He also spent time over in Kintyre at a small hut at Saddle Bay. In those days, you could cross the Firth of Clyde, regularly in steamers from Fairley Pier, indeed, and from Ardrossan, and you could get over to Arran, and you could get over to Tarbert, and you could get to Campbellton. So it was quite a regular traffic across the Clyde, which brought these parts of the country quite close together. And basically, I argue in the essay that, White meets Semple at quite a formative age. He borrows books from Semple's library, which is referred to in the essay, so I won't detail those then here. But I mean, in particular, he got the idea of, if you like, Eastern wisdom or sources of Buddhist and Vedantic teachings from reading them in Dougal's library, because it would have been an unusual private library in Fairley in the 1950s, very small, conservative, coastal Clydeside town, and here there was this Aladdin's cave of material. And basically, I argue in the essay that the project that becomes Geopoetics was given some validation, legitimation by an older father figure, Dougal Semple, from the same kind of cultural cloth as Kenneth White. I mean, Kenneth White had been born in Glasgow and was growing up in Fairley. Dougal had been born just up the road in Johnston, living in Beath, so that kind of north North Ayrshire, Renfrewshire, Glasgow connections, both from Presbyterian Protestant families, so formed by a particular kind of culture there, but both intensely interested in getting close to the land. And at the time when White met Semple, he says in the autobiography that's just been published that Dougal was wont to go up into the hills to get spring water to drink. He wouldn't drink the mains water, you know. So here again, we have this sense of trying to get back to a purity and rawness of expression from the earth. And if you could possibly scroll down to the map, just to finish off, which gives a nice, you know, a visual representation of the ground. There we are, the ground on which they were walking. Great, that's fantastic. So this is a 1945 Ordnance Survey map of the Fairley area. If you could put the wee black cursor onto Fairley, just on the to the left there on the coast, that'd be grand. That's there we are. There we are. So Fairley is where it's all happening. So this would be a very close representation of what the landscape was like at that time. So 5 years after this, you know, Dougal and Kenneth met. So this is very much what the landscape looked like then. I mean, there's now wind farms and various other stuff going on in the area, because I think probably like Pat, when I went down there with my son Neil, we walked up Fairley Glen, which is there's a wee track that goes up the side of Fairley to about where the cursor is there, or where you are. If the cursor, yeah, that's Fairley Glen, lovely, great. And Dougal, Kenneth describes, you know, his frolickings on Fairley Moor, you know, running around, you know, being an animal, following the animals, communing with the landscape. We walked over Fairley Moor over to Blyloch Hill, which if you follow the cursor sort of to 1 o'clock, there we are, that's great. We got up there, and the other main bit of land that Kenneth describes is Came Hill, which is southwest of Blyloch Hill. But by that time, the rain was coming on, so we kind of headed back down Fairley Glen with a good old soaking. But from up there on the moor, you can see right across in better weather, you know, the Clyde coastline, and you have a very expansive sense, the vista of the landscape and the seascape, but you've also got the presence under your feet of moorland and a kind of raw, wild landscape, just really half an hour out of the village. You're up there on the moors. So I argue in the essay, basically, that the two of them coming together was quite formative for Kenneth at a young stage in his life, and he found some legitimation in an elder, if you like, who was doing something not at all dissimilar in the earlier part of the 20th century from what Kenneth White would start doing in the latter part of the 20th century. So that's it, really. Thanks very much for including the essay. And if you could just scroll down, you'll see a final picture of the two of them in later life. There's on the left, there's Dougal walking on the prom at Legs, aged about 79, and then of course there's Kenneth to the right of him, two old gents with long white hair, which is how Kenneth White first describes Dougal when he meets him, this old, long, white-haired fellow, he says. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. That was really interesting. And well done, Alistair, for your mouse movements. Nori, did you just want to come in and say what you just put in the chat? You're on mute still. Come on, Nori.
I'll be very brief. I met Kenneth White when I was 17 in Glasgow University, and he loaned me a book about vegetarianism written by Dougal Semple. And I went away and tried to bake my own bread in my mother's oven, and I tried out vegetarianism for a while. And I think White himself was vegetarian, and Marie Claude for quite a number of years. But I do think Steve in this article is very much on the ball that Dougal Semple was a major influence on Kenneth White. And to some extent, that's not been recognised as much either by Kenneth White himself or by others who've written about him. So I think this is a very important contribution to Stravaig and to our understanding of where Kenneth White came from, and in particular as as Steve has said, the influence of Eastern thinking on white, which we think will be perhaps one of the themes of our next issue of Stravaig 17. So I think that's enough from me.
Thanks, Norrie, and a thumbs up from Steve there. Super. Great. So next we're going to move on to Caroline Watson, who I know is here, and she is one of the co-editors of Stravaig as well, and she's going to be talking about her artwork, and I'll just introduce you, Caroline, if that's okay. Caroline Watson divides her time between her studio in Paisley and working in housing and homelessness. She makes drawings and mixed media works on paper depicting light and space to create work that is about connection and attachment to place, with a particular interest in urban green space. She is committed to the local creative and cultural community where she lives, most recently opening a new gallery and art space as part of her role as a board member of Created Renfrewshire. She is part of the Stravaig editorial team. Over to you, Caroline.
Hi there. Thanks, Marcel. So I think the two pieces that are in this came from a trip I did to Ontario. I grew up in Canada, and we were visiting the sort of a beach area and the Baymouth Dunes. It's one of the largest freshwater dunes in the world, and I'd never really heard of it before. For all, I grew up in Ontario, west of Toronto, and we explored east of Toronto. And I think the other thing for me is that I'm never looking for wild spaces. I'm always looking for spaces, I suppose, that are developed and by people, and often that I've always lived in urban centers, whether it's small cities or whatever. But and most of the work I do is about places I visit. And this was it's a large park, and it has camping and beaches, and you can do barbecues on the beach. There are walks, and it's a provincial park in Ontario, and so they're trying to balance I guess the park as a place of recreation for people to come to, but also to preserve and conserve the flora and fauna that exist in the area. In this area, it's particular the grasses. I think for me, it was the experience of walking through the dunes. They're huge, immense, and they have trees growing out of them, as well as smaller plant life. I often do pictures of trees and sticks, and these I was kind of surprised to find all these lovely white sticks on the dunes. And I suppose part of it is I think of sticks as that they can be ritualistic, and I raised two little boys, so they were always finding sticks, and we used to collect sticks and have a collection in our house. They were magical, they were practical. They also kind of represent what was there before, what's been washed aside. It's got history in it, so that for me there's lots of connections to that. And the idea of white, I think when I first came across Geopoetics was at the SEAL conference, and I took to it kind of intrigued me, so I went, and I loved the whole idea of the white. And whenever I've made work, I'm attracted to Japanese and Chinese art because I love the white spaces, which are never empty spaces, but always active. And I think also the idea of white gives that moment where you can think about things, slow down, and it's about interaction and maybe, the mind and the soul or whatever. And there's one of Kenneth White's books I read, there's a beautiful quote, the white of a clarity beyond facts, which I just love. I don't know if it's his quote or someone he's quoting, it wasn't really clear, but I love the idea of the white. And I think that's why I chose to look at the white sticks rather than maybe the flow of the landscape and things like that. And I think that's kind of it, really.
Thank you. That's great. I love that top one. There's those kind of like echoes of each other on the gorgeous. Thank you, Caroline. Okay, and next we're going to move on to Martina. I think I've seen her here. Martina, yes, there we are. Hello.
Sorry, yes, I'm here.
No, that's
Yeah.
right. I'll just introduce you quick if that's okay. And Martina's going to talk about her fabulous photography. So Martina Kolb holds a PhD in comparative literature from Yale University and is Weber Professor in the Humanities. Oh, can you say this word for me? What's your university?
Susquehanna, like the Susquehanna River.
Super. Susquehanna University of Pennsylvania. She is an award-winning scholar who has published widely at the intersections of geopoetics, aesthetics, psychoanalysis, and the interarts. Her monograph, Freud, Ben, and the Azure Spell of Ligura, apologies, comes highly recommended by reviewers and appears in the paperback in 2023. She currently finishes Rendezvous in the Alps, a collaborative book that presents historical fiction multilingually, German and English translations of the Spanish epistolary novel set in Silas Maria, enmeshed in inventing correspondence. Apologies for my pronunciation there. Over to you, Martina.
No problem. Thank you very much for accepting these photographs. They are dear to me, and I'm very happy that I can share them beyond my coffee table. The trip to Sils Maria is in the Upper Engadine in Switzerland, where Nietzsche spent the significant summers of his most prolific years. Whereas in the winters he was in Liguria, which is what the book is about. And Kenneth White, I just took a note when someone said that, it will depend on the influences and who acknowledges them. So Nietzsche is actually an influence that Kenneth White acknowledged abundantly. I'm generally more interested in the ones that don't come acknowledged by the author, by the artist. For example, Freud did not acknowledge Nietzsche, but it couldn't be clearer what the influences are. So the work I'm currently doing is finishing a translation of a Spanish novel where Nietzsche and Freud are imagined to have met and have met in Sils Maria. So that's where all these curious place names that are not, in front of everybody's door here come from. So I went inspired by White. I think White's focus on Nietzsche, there are more details than what I'm briefly going to say. The one is, of course, the nomadic, the nomadic life that Nietzsche, gave up his citizenship, went to Switzerland, gave up his tenured professorship, and sort of became a nomad in the sense that White also relished, connected to being on foot, really, to the walk, to the grounding, to pounding the ground, and these kinds of things. Also, this interest of Nietzsche is very much in sort of the intersection of nature and art. I've heard today, how buildings melt back into the landscape, how stone could potentially be considered scientifically, which it has, but also artistically, or let's say simply naturally. So the potential of stone, I think, is also a point for White to have called Nietzsche one of his major precursors, as Nietzsche was someone who practically philosophized the stone. There are many quotations one could list where the stone is sort of metaphorically, but also literally referred to in Nietzsche's especially mature writings, like of his nomadic, so-called nomadic years. So what I did is I just took the walks that Nietzsche supposedly took, the milestones where he said, this is the exact place, this rock where Zarathustra came to me as a character. This is where he first visited me. And then I wrote, and also titles of Nietzsche's where I think White really makes clear reference to. And I say that in the little text I wrote underneath. But so the wanderer in her shadow, this is my shadow finally getting to this rock after many hours of walking along the hills of Lake Silva Plana, actually, which is the village after Sils Maria. Nietzsche's work is obviously called Der Wanderer und sein Schatten, The Wanderer and His Shadow, and White's title, The Wanderer and His Charts, I think is relatable, to say the very least. Nietzsche also wrote quite a bit. Even when he looked at sculptural reliefs at the cemetery in Genoa, for example, he said, I feel like the image is sleeping in the stone for me. I, as the beholder, have to sort of extract it with my act of perception here on location. And then he says also the stone is more stone than it used to be, or the stone becomes more stone than it was when it's handled, when it's entering sort of the cultural sphere of also artistic or poetic, if you want, in the sense of making. And then the third one, the third one looks better on a black background, I think, because it becomes more brilliant when he came to the lake. And he's also someone who celebrated the moment of midday, noon, high noon, and midnight were his two big temporal references. And he said, I came here and it was ganz See, ganz Mittag. So nothing but lake, nothing but midday or noon. So it's a small collection that sort of addresses three angles at which from which to look at Nietzsche, and I think with a sort of looming reference here to Kenneth White's work. And I just explained a little bit of the same thing underneath here. That's really all. Thank you so much for letting me do this.
Thank you, Martina. That's really interesting. How wonderful to be in the footsteps as well. Wonderful. Thank you.
There was a Scotsman in his 90s, and Nori will know who it is, who said, so you're going to walk in Nietzsche's footsteps. You do know that you're quite bonkers. I said, yes, I do. So here we go. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and next up we have Sara Davies. I think she's here. Is that Sara's iPhone? Are you Sara Davies? I think so. Going to take that as a yes because you're talking and reaching forward, and and you're going to talk about your artwork. And I'm going to introduce you quickly if that's okay. Sara Davies lives on the edge of the Peak District in England, but continually feels drawn to being in Scotland, maybe because of her family's Scottish heritage. She has always been a creative, using visual arts and the written word to express her relationship with the natural world. She enjoys immersing herself in nature by wild swimming and hiking, and making art outdoors as often as possible. Her latest artworks use mixed media applied to Indian recycled handmade paper. Fabulous. Her work is often a response to the sea, other bodies of water and islands, which is reflected in her palettes. She is glad to have found a home in Geopoetics. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. And thank you for accepting my work. It's fantastic. Thank you. I'll probably just start off with a little couple of lines of a poem that's inspired me recently to produce or start producing a series of paintings of islands. I seem to always be visiting different islands. I'm on the Isle of Cumbria at the moment on my holidays. I visited last year. And this little poem is by Kenneth Stevens. He is a writer and a poet. And he did it for the Corbenic community, the Camphill community in Dunkeld. They've got a poetry path there, and he wrote, and this poem is imprinted on the path. And it goes like this: in all the hurry of our lives, we need so much just now and then to find an island. And from that, I've been producing work to do with islands, and my palette is very much about water and the earth. Like you say, I enjoy wild swimming, so sometimes take my paints with me when I go swimming and paint outdoors. Oh, I didn't know that actually. Yeah, Norman's just said he lives on Sale next to Lings, so that's good. Yeah, so, and I've just bought some paints as well from a company called Florence Paints, and they make them from earth pigments from a disused iron mine in Cumbria. So I've just started incorporating them, which is a lovely thing because it takes you back to the earth again. I was really inspired last few years by Joan Erdley. A lot of people actually that crop up in Norman's book, and also Pascal Wrench, who's a lot to do with the Poetic Society. She's been a big inspiration for my work as well. And then nature writers such as Nan Shepherd, which again crop up in Norman's book, Catherine Stewart, and then poems by Norman as well, actually. And I like to work in mixed media, watercolours, charcoal, pencil, inks, and then the pigments, like I said. Anything else to tell you, really? And I've always been creative, really. I like doing a bit of poetry and a bit of creative writing as well. But I'm really finding my feet with my painting again the last couple of years, because I spend a lot of time outdoors now, and it's, you know, just I find it connects me to the earth. But yeah, I've not got a lot more to say, really. Just that. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you so much. And how wonderful to have a chorus of approval behind you there. We can hear the birds just about in the background.
Yes, yeah.
Very, very atmospheric. Thank you, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, and next up we have Dave Francis, and he's a committee member on the Geopoetics committee as well. David, do tell us, are you going to talk about your essay, or are you going to sing us a song?
I'm not going to sing a song. I'll explain why in a second.
Okay, let me introduce you first. David Francis is the treasurer of the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics. He recently retired as director of Scotland's Traditional Music Forum, and is himself a musician, songwriter, dance caller, and storyteller. Okay, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. The essay that I contributed is actually a slight reworking of a talk that I did. I think it was during lockdown when the centre was actually doing quite a lot of online discussions, and it was kind of prompted by the fact that there's actually very little writing about music in the Geopoetics literature. There's I think one chapter by Kenneth White in The Wanderer and His Charts, and he's also written about an encounter that he had with Hamish Henderson, who's for those of you who don't know, was the founder of the School of Scottish Studies at the University of Edinburgh, and is a poet and songwriter and political activist as well. And of course, Tony McManus, one of the founders of the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics, was a musician and songwriter himself. But that aside, as I say, there's very little writing. And I'm just kind of musing about the kind of abstract nature of music as vibration in the air, and thinking about how the way that those vibrations are culturally coded, and how we might get beyond that to what White calls the uncoded space. And then as a little sideways ramble into the distinction between what the Chinese artist Wei Wei calls the artists who create world and the artists who has world, which I explain about in the essay, and I talk about how the particular sonic configurations that I'm interested in, that we call traditional music or folk music, is a kind of art form which I suppose you could say has world by its very nature, because it's transmitted from generation to generation, but also how it can be used as a resource for to create world, and as a resource for creativity. So and I've added the lyrics to a song that I wrote. I did the lyrics, and my musical partner Mary Campbell did the melody for it. Now, famously or notoriously, song lyrics and poetry are two very, very different beasts. They have different functions, different rhythms. But I will read this if it's okay. I won't sing it because it's not a song I've ever sung. In fact, I think we've only ever performed it live once, although it has been recorded, and you can find it on YouTube. And the first part of it was actually basically this sort of transcription of a dream, just a description of a dream, and the rest of the poem talks about just the kind of mess that we're in, and how we might address that, and how our relationship with the earth might be the way that we kind of find our way back to some kind of sense of balance and sanity. And then the last verse of it, which is actually the middle eight of the song, to use the technical term, is directly inspired by Kenneth White when he wrote, "I find it impossible to separate in my mind the line made by a range of mountains or a sea tide from a line of writing or a line drawn in a painting. I see analogous forces at work, resulting in similar forms. The literature and visual art that interest me have always something of this order. What I'm looking for in literature and art is a sensation of space, a tentative exploration, and a reduction to the essential." So the song is called "There Is a Light." Boats break up in surf, trees are felled and cleared, jeeps and soldiers come with guns and fire, roofs and temples burn, cattle graze in dust, crows fly over razor wire. How does it heal this world that we feel is failing before our eyes? How to turn back and move from the deepest black to blue before it dies? Is there a light within our sight we can find and turn to? What can we give so we can live with others on an earth renewed? Play the river's sound, speak the falcon's cry, write the touch of moss and bark and stone, hear the skylark's song falling through the air, touching the earth, its home. Thank you.
Oh, that was really beautiful. Thank you, David, and to your co-writer. So kind of resonant, even though it's kind of spoken rather than sung. Thank you. And so great to have an article about music as well. When we think of kind of the creative arts and writing and things like that, and artwork, often music is overlooked, and it's so important, especially in kind of oral traditions of storytelling as well, isn't it? The musicality of things. So thank you for adding that extra dimension to our journal this time round. Thank you, David. Okay, and next we're going to move on to Anne Dunford. I think, Anne, are you here?
Yeah.
Let me find you on my screen. Apologies. There you are. Hello. And I'm just going to introduce you quickly, if that's all right. And Anne is going to read her poem to us, I think. Anne Dunford, after a career predominantly in education, but with a few detours, moved to Wigtownshire in 2002 to focus on writing, photography and gardening. Her poems have been widely published in poetry magazines, anthologies by Dovetail Scotland and online. She has read her poems in From the Mountains to the Sea, at Big Lit and Wigtown Book Festival. Okay, over to you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the editorial team for including this in that fantastic edition. I'm looking forward to reading all of it. And some of the artwork is just inspiring. Right. Well, my poem, I was a bit embarrassed. I had to email Norrie and say I couldn't find it on my computer. So I was very glad I was able to print it off after I'd looked at this online today. The last weekend in February, every year, the RSPB beached bird surveys carried out by volunteers. And my late husband and I did this walk along the coast from Ninian's Cave to Point of Lag. That's along the part of the Macas Peninsula. It could be invigorating, it could be depressing, but it was a necessary thing for everybody to do, unfortunately. So the last weekend in February, wormcasts punctuate sentences along lines of sea-sculpted texts on this wintry, deserted shore. On lower reaches, shining pebbles, polished smooth after years of tumbling, glisten with salty gel alongside sea glass, gems of blue, green, brown, half buried, waiting to be uncovered as someone's treasure amongst the detritus. Walking along the high tide line, we count carcasses of beached birds, some oiled, some identified only by a wing. Ubiquitous plastic, used freely, washed up daily on every shore, punctuates with poisonous messages. That's very sad to see so much plastic washed up on a beautiful coastline.
Yeah, thank you. And a really important poem, isn't it, to see how we're kind of now treating our environment. And such beautiful sounds and rhythms in the start of that. Really great to have after Dave's essay about music. Lovely, thank you. Apologies. Next we're going to move on to Cindy Stevens. Cindy, are you happy to read your poem?
Yes.
Lovely. Let me just introduce you then first. Thank you. Cindy Stevens lives on the beautiful west coast of the Isle of Barra. She has lived and worked in several European and African countries, but rarely leaves Scotland these days. A sociologist by training, she has published a variety of prose works as well as poetry. Okay, over to you, Cindy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This is, unlike the previous poem, a long time ago. This is based on memories. I was doing some research in Finland and took the opportunity to go up to Lapland. And this is in the days before mass tourism, before Father Christmas was in Lapland. And I also went to the extreme north where there's this large Lake Inari. And this was just a few memories. The only one I couldn't get into the poem was the one how to draw water with a wooden bucket from a Jack and Jill well. I never learnt the technique, but I clearly survived. I've been back to Finland on occasions since, but never managed to get to Lapland again. So this is very nostalgic for me, but clearly you thought it was relevant to Stravaig, and I'm very grateful for that. So, by Lake Inari. At night, the permafrost seeps cold through the ground sheet. The daylight lingers. Scrubby birches, mosses, lichens enclose the tent. The great lake reaches to where reindeer roam. Midges torment us. This is Lapland.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Cindy. Again, what lovely white space in that poem, and you read it beautifully. Thank you. Okay, and next we're going to move on to another artwork with Andrew Phillips. Andrew, are you ready and willing? I can see he's here. Andrew, are you ready to talk about your artwork?
Hello everyone.
Hi. Are you ready? Are you ready to talk about?
I just heard you there from across the room. Unfortunately, I'm not visible because I'm here. I'm only 50% here. Unfortunately, I'm having to do something else at the same time.
No problem.
Sorry, I won't be able to offer any words, but thank you so much for including me, and it's been really wonderful to partially listen, and I hope to listen back to the recording of today. So thanks everyone, and yeah. It's a wonderfully put together journal. Great to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I am going to introduce you quickly just for the recording. So if people listen back, they can understand who's done these beautiful art pieces, if that's okay. So Andrew Phillips is from Worthing in Sussex, a coastal town at the foot of the South Downs. Currently residing in Newport, South Wales, Andrew studied a BA Hons in Fine Art Contemporary Media at the University of South Wales and an MA Art Psychotherapy at Goldsmith College, London. Working in a variety of mediums, including pastels, ink, graphite, acrylic, and oil, Andrew's paintings and mixed media drawings explore landscape and the numerous. Informed by personal experience of awe and wonder in nature, folklore, myth, and the wisdom traditions that revere the earth and its varied forms as living presences. Wonderful, thank you. Well, that was it from our kind of list of readers for tonight. Was anybody else who is here who has something? Would anyone else like to?
How about yourself, Marcel?
I'm okay because I'm kind of, preoccupied. Thank you, though. That's because I asked if you would sing, didn't I? Anybody else like to offer their work to talk about or anything? No? Okay. No, do you want to finish the session, if that's okay?
Well, what about, are there any questions or comments anyone wants to make about anything they've heard tonight? You can also comment in the chat. We haven't got as much time as we'd hoped for questions and discussion, but I hope you'll feel that it was well worthwhile having so many contributions this evening and getting the range of work that's in Stravaig 16. Has anybody got any questions or anything they want to add to what we've heard? We do have a wee bit of time for discussion.
I've got a question for Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, I mean, what about the music that comes from singing stones? This idea that early people would take glacial erratics, which often ring, and use those as the early music. And I wondered whether your interest in music goes back as far as that kind of music. Or
only really to acknowledge, that I think I mentioned in my piece that the ringing stones and imitation of bird song are really thought to be, the kind of fundamentals of music and the human shaping of sound and using it for particular purposes.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't really know that much about it. I was gonna just gonna say that it was interesting in Anne's poem, the one that came after me. Again, that idea of the analogy between writing and marks on the paper and the sort of shapes that occur in nature, particularly to do with mountain ranges and shorelines, came up in her poem as well. I thought that was very apposite.
Thank you. And Alice, do you want to just read what you've just put in the chat, if that's okay? You're on mute at the moment.
I can do. I hope you've seen it says John Muir at the bottom, not me.
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay, just something I started. It was actually just the header of a chapter of a book I was reading, but I loved it. It says, the sun shines not on us, but in us. The rivers flow not past, but through us. Thrilling, tingling, vibrating every fibre and cell of the substance of our bodies, making them glide and sing. The trees wave and the flowers bloom in our bodies, as well as in our souls, and every bird song, wind song, and tremendous storm song of the rocks in the hearts of the mountains is our song, our very own, and sings our love. John Muir.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we've just got another message in the chat, and Carol has asked if we could hear Caroline talk about her back cover art, if you wouldn't mind, Caroline. And I'm a bit more scrolling for you. I'm sorry, Alice, you're not off the hook yet.
So it's called From the Ground, and it was a series of photographs I did. I've always made drawings and always taken photographs, but never merged the two. And a lot of my photography was really reference for making drawings. And I wanted to see if I could find a way to bring those two things together. And I think the series was really inspired by my interest in geopoetics and learning about it. And so this one is quite an obvious one. It's called From the Ground, which is the title for the whole series. And I got a Visual Arts and Craft Makers Award to do it. And this was taken at Cullen. And it's an image of the stone, looking into the stones, the water, in the waterfalls there, and the trees being reflected in it. I did another image. That one was a straightforward photograph, but I loved the layering and manipulated a little. So I love the layering of it. Sort of, the sky, the ground, the water, the trees, the growth. The other ones I did were more manipulated and combining different images. And again, all of them were taken in urban settings. That one's in a village where I was trying to, I suppose, create images that would bring together what we see and what we feel and what we experience. And that we don't always need to go to wild places to experience nature and to feel connected, but we can find that in our towns and our cities. Sorry, my clock's about to ring.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Carol, for drawing our attention to it, because I hadn't quite scrolled that far yet. It's a fantastic image, isn't it? And Anne, did you just want to say something in response to David? Apologies that I didn't notice you there. Apologies.
Yes, sorry. It's, I mean, obviously I write a lot, and just seeing the beaches and the worm casts, and they just reminded me of punctuation. But it's also, it's like music, the notes on a stave as well, isn't it? It's, yeah, I mean, the beaches are just inspiring for so many aspects of art, whether you're using words or paint or music, whatever. We're very lucky to live where we do, I think.
Thank you. Okay. Nori, anything else from you before we head off for the evening?
Yep. Could you just scroll up to the membership? Just a few pages up the way, Alistair. That's the one. Yeah. It's just a plug. If you've enjoyed tonight and you want to support Geopoetics and help to promote it further and explore the idea and get involved with the many members that we have, at least 100 members fully paid up at the moment, and lots of others who have been members and are still around, then it's very simple. You just fill in that form there and you send it to Dave Francis, or you send it to info@geopoetics.org.uk, and you do a bank transfer, and the details of the account, the Geopoetics account, are there, and Dave will acknowledge that, and I will send you a copy of Grounding a World, Essays on the Work of Kenneth White, which Alba Editions has published. So basically you get, for the $9.95 that the book costs, you get free membership, or you get a free book with the membership. So I hope some of you, and one person here tonight has already done so, and I'm very grateful to her for doing so. So yeah, I think it would be helpful if everyone could check out the the link on the website to, if you go to the geopoetics.org.uk and onto the online journal section, you'll find Stravaig 16 there. And we're going to promote it on Facebook in particular and elsewhere on social media in the coming week. So it would be great if some of you felt like you could share that and let other people know about it. Please pass on the link to your friends who you think might be interested in reading it. The more people who read it, the better. And we'll be bringing out another one over the summer. We'll announce the themes and the deadline for Stravaig 17, and that will probably be about a vision for the future for Geopoetics, and also in particular about Eastern thinking. We've already got a very good essay and poem by Alan Spence, a well-known Scottish writer, for that issue, which I think would fit very well if the editorial group so decides. But I think I'm very, very grateful to everyone who's taken part tonight, and to all those who have joined us this evening for this online lunch. And I hope you'll join us again for future occasions. If you haven't, well, what we normally do is add your email address with your permission to our mailing list, and then you will get up-to-date information. They only come out once or twice a month normally when there's an event coming up, and we try to advertise in the news anything that we think relates to geopoetics, whether it's art exhibitions or poetry readings or scientific papers or whatever. So that's all from me, and I'm very grateful. I'd like everyone to join with me in thanking Marcel for chairing this evening so well and so enjoyably from my point of view, and also to Alistair Duncan for managing the technical side tonight so well. So thanks to both of them. If you could join with me in a vote of thanks, that would be great. And thanks for coming from all over the world, particularly East Africa, David, from your island. Do you want to say anything, David, while you're with us? It's great to have you here.
Before you close, just great to meet you all, because it's the first time I've been on this. Though I contacted Norman recently because I thought we could maybe create a Geopoetics Centre here. Well, we're going to work towards that, maybe. But I didn't ever meet Kenneth, but I corresponded with him in the mid-70s. And then we lost touch after that, because I went traveling as a photographer all over the place, India, North Africa, and finally ended up here. And that's a long story we can't get into tonight.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to make the connection with you, David, and I'm sure we're going to continue this contact in the weeks and months to come. The work, if you would like to share your website or a link in the chat, I think that would be of great interest to other members of the Scottish Centre for Geopoetics. If you could do that before we close, that would be a great.
Yeah, you mean the Substack one or the?
Whichever you wish.
Both. Well, in terms of writing, that's probably the best one. Yeah. Let me put it in the message then.
Yeah. It's always very refreshing when someone new comes across, well, new to us, gets in touch about geopoetics. It really is very encouraging. And you're off the coast of Kenya in Africa.
Yeah, there it is. Right, yeah, it's currently a free Substack. So, but if you find anything you're interested in there, though a lot of it's more specific to here, but not all of it, you can just subscribe and you'll be automatically put on the mail list for whatever post comes up.
Great.
But we should do a Zoom soon, maybe sometime this month, Matt.
Yeah, Yeah, later in the month would be good for me, David. Well, you and I have been in email correspondence and arranged that.
Yep.
That would be
Sure.
very, very helpful to me. And if I can assist and advise you about forming your own group, we've got a lot of experience, as you know, 30 to 35 years. Yeah. It would be wonderful to have for the first time a group in Africa. You know, that would be amazing. Anyone else before we close up? Marcel, you want to say a farewell to everyone?
I feel like I should now. Thanks for that. I'll just reiterate, thank you really to the editorial team. It's so wonderful to see a journal with such a mix of different medias, actually. And when we talked about what geopoetics is, it means something very personal to each different creative, and actually how you bring that together in a journal, and how all those pieces kind of relate to each other in that thread. It really is a skill which as someone who works behind the scenes in other publications, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to do it. And you both and everyone in the editorial team, they've done a fantastic job with this one. It's so lovely to see Geopoetics come to life in so many different mediums. And that's always bright, kind of looking to the future when we're thinking about how we kind of inhabit the earth and kind of keep it close to us. So thank you for all your contributions, and thank you to the editorial team for taking our work with such care. And as we say, we hope you submit next time in the summer as well. And as Nori said, kind of spread the word about geopoetics, and so we can all live in a kind of a bit more grace with each other in the world that's kind of around us. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you all very soon. Okay, bye for now, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.